Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's PEO 2023 Council Election All Candidates meeting. My name is Arthur Sinclair, and I will be the moderator for tonight's discussion. Tonight, we will hear from candidates for President-elect. The three candidates for the position are Greg Wojciak, Fred Sekijechi, and Marilyn Spinks. The electronic meeting with the candidates via webcast enable voters to learn more about the candidates and PEO issues, so more of them will vote. Voters were able to post questions online in advance of the discussion. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible. In accordance with the approved protocol for all candidates meeting, as moderator, I may shorten the questions and not read out preambles to questions, may select any question, may remove offensive and duplicate questions, and may ask questions not on the platform. Each candidate will be provided 3 minutes for opening remarks. I will then direct a question to a candidate. That candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. After the candidate has responded, the two remaining candidates will have 1 minute to address the first candidate's response to the question. Following the question period, the candidates will have 2 minutes each for closing remarks. The order of speakers was determined by draw earlier this evening. The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast do not necessarily reflect the views of PEO and are the responsibility of the candidates. So, without further delay, let's get started. Opening remarks. The first candidate for president-elect is Greg Wojciak.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for tuning in to our web debate. It's good to see Arthur back in the chair as moderator. Barry Steinberg's shoes were big ones to fill. To my Ukrainian and Russian friends, I wish a happy Christmas today. Christos narodivся. No more war. My name is Greg Wojciak. Many of you already know that I've been active in PEO affairs for 25 years. I've served 3 terms on PEO Council and was PEO's executive analyst in 2011 to 2012, reporting directly to the president. I also chaired the Powerful Communications Committee during a period of great change at PEO. Those 2.5 decades have given me an unmatched knowledge of the history and culture of this profession, which your president must have to pilot this organization into the future. This election is all about the future of PEO, how to continue providing world-class engineering to the public while preserving the member-directed self-regulation, which has worked so well for 10 decades. I know my fellow candidates quite well and consider them my friends. We differ, however, on our views on the future of PEO. Self-regulation is effective, visionary, and it protects the public interest. It has done so brilliantly for 100 years. It is unique to Canada's professions, but certain forces recently have been trying to take this away from us and to reduce member and volunteer involvement. For the sake of our members, past, present, and future, and especially new, young, diverse cohort entering the profession, I want to see a lean, modern PEO which provides real value to being licensed. Young engineers who perceive no value in being licensed but see bureaucracy and an out-of-touch council will continue to forego licensure. Worse, government and industry will also continue to ignore us. Those of us who have enjoyed a full career as PNGs owe a bright future to those now entering our profession. Therefore, I will continue to fight to preserve a democratic, modern, adaptable, diverse, visionary, and relevant PEO, which serves the interest of both the profession and the public we serve. More than ever, it's time for fresh perspectives on council.
The second candidate for president-elect is Fred Sekijechi.
Hi everybody. Good evening. My name is Fred Sekijechi, and I'm running for president-elect position. I have worked as a volunteer in my local chapter for more than 20 years. It has always been a pleasure to serve. I'm all about accountability, devotion, integrity, professionalism, transparency, and honesty. I have also nearly 30 years of professional work experience in the engineering industry, including product design, analysis, development, and commercialization, along with an educational background in project management and business. I'm also running my own engineering services company for nearly 20 years, working with large corporations. I believe a leader must have a vision to make risky decisions in critical situations. If a leader cannot do this, then what is the leader for? I'm not here to be another counselor or act as a staff member. I'm here to make sure we're all moving in the right direction. PO is neither a for-profit company nor a government agency. PO is something more. It's powered by its own members, so it must work for its members as well as the public. I'm here to make sure it happens. We all need to be united in order to use all our power and resources for helping our community under a wise leadership. I'm well aware there would be challenges and oppositions on my way. That's why I need you all to overcome any problem. We are all professional engineers, regardless of our ethnicity, mother language, background, race, etc. We are all here to take our hands and to help each other out to achieve our goals. I'm running to ensure that PO remains a pioneer in professionalism and public safety, to cooperate with the council to make it more effective, to focus on self-regulation, value, and enforcement, to modernize the PO with innovative ideas, to monitor financial accountability and advocate to keep costs low, to reduce tasks related to continuing professional development or CPD, as it is known within my means, to reduce membership fees if it's possible. And last but not least, to create a bridge between the industry and members to make sure professional engineers continue to guard the public safety. I wish luck for my fellow candidates. I hope if you are elected, follow the same goals I'm following. This night is not just for me or other candidates. This night belongs to all members anywhere in our provinces. If they give me a chance to help, I will do it with all my heart and power.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The third candidate for president-elect is Marilyn Spink.
Hi, I can go ahead. Yes, I'm Marilyn Spink, and I just want to thank Art and the PO staff for their efforts to organize and hold these all candidates meetings, and also to thank Greg and Fred and all the other candidates for putting their name forward to serve the profession and the people of Ontario. Again, my name is Marilyn Spink, and I am a practicing engineer, having spent over 25 years managing the engineering delivery of complex mine development projects throughout the world. I actually began my career in mechanical design and transitioned to engineering design after completing an engineering degree at Queen's University. And over my career, I've earned leadership roles of increasing responsibility to manage multidisciplinary engineering design teams to deliver these capital projects, in North or South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. And they've ranged in value from, US 500 million to $9 billion. And reflecting on my career, most of these projects, I've chosen to be part of them because they've touched the many, many lives and had a profound impact on the developing countries in which these projects were located. I see engineering and mine development as a social development tool. In terms of being involved with PO, I've been involved with PO since 2013, over, 7 years. First, I was appointed as a public appointee, with renewed twice, so I did a pretty decent job. And then I was elected your vice president. And I was also appointed vice president by my council peers, and I've held other leadership roles, chairing various task forces and working groups and committees. I have a lot of reasons for running, and my reasons for running are, I want to continue the modernization of PEO that was started under the councils I was part of, to ensure we have a future ready, inclusive and responsive regulator, which will result in I'm convinced, in a strong and relevant engineering profession. My goal is to leave the profession better than I found it, and partly because I have two sons who are entering the profession. As Greg said, we need to leave it better than we found it for the future generation. And I desperately want this profession to be relevant and there for them when they are ready to make the commitment like I did. But mostly, one of my main is because the world needs engineers to ethically solve and be accountable. And that's with the license to solve many of these wicked problems that humanity is facing. And so I'm asking for your vote for Marilyn Spink as your president-elect.
Thank you. That concludes the opening remarks segment. Let's go to the audience questions. The first question goes to Greg. Based on your knowledge of the Professional Engineers Act and the regulations, how would you describe, in your own words, PEO's core mandate?
Well, I'm actually surprised that this question needs to be asked. Any of us who serves on council is supposed to know the regulations and the act. When I was on council a few years ago, they put posters up on the wall saying regulator or association. And we are both. The act says so. But the principal object that's in the act is to govern the members, license holders, and certificate of authorization holders, etc. In accordance with the act and the regulations and bylaws, in order that the public interest be preserved. So that's the key thing here, the public interest. And my position is that the public interest and the profession's interest are one and the same.
Thank you. Fred, your response, PEO's core mandate?
Well, I would say I agree with Greg. There is a safe public safety involved. Is again is watching, monitoring the engineering activities in the region and enforcing the act. These are very important. But question here is how far we can go with that. When there are so many works done in the industry by non-professional engineers, and we don't have any access to that. We cannot impose anything, enforce any law, any regulation. But this is my question.
Thank you. Marilyn, your response with respect to PEO's core mandate?
The core mandate is to regulate the practice of professional engineering in the public interest on behalf of the people of Ontario, not in the self-interest of engineers. And the definition of public interest, I would say, could actually be more clearly defined. But public interest is not just limited to simply keeping people safe, which I hear so many people say. The public interest is much broader, as outlined in the Professional Engineers Act. And it encompasses the safeguarding of life, yes, and safety, right? But also includes safeguarding of health, property, economic interests, the public welfare, or the environment. And one of the mandates I see is PEO, yes, is a regulator, but it's also an organization. And it's really, really important that PEO become, a professional modern regulator that delivers on it this statutory mandate that we've been given, which is a privilege, not a right, and is given to us by the government.
Thank you.
But it has to be supported by a governance culture that consistently makes decisions that serve and protect the public interest. Thanks.
So now we start rotating who goes first. The next question goes to Fred. The question is, circling back to the previous, what do you see as your role as president-elect and president in fulfillment of PEO's core mandate?
Well, I would say we all have one and only one role. The one duty, all of us, to enforce the Professional Engineering Act. We have to make sure Act is applied, is followed. This is what most important thing. I wouldn't think about anything else. All decisions made in the council, all activities, what the staff doing, whatever. We all want the Act to happen. Yes. As for me, I have to add something else to it. As a leader, if I'm elected, I have to have this ability to make risky decisions if time comes in the critical moments. That's what a leader should do. And always I'm trying to follow the rules and regulations and make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And so rotating through this, next is Marilyn, then Greg. So Marilyn, how do you see your role as president-elect, then president, in fulfilling of the PEO's core mandate?
My role really, should I be elected as your president-elect, is to effectively chair council once I'm president. It is really council that makes the decisions regarding the organizational oversight and strategic direction of PEO as a governing, as the governing body over the engineering regulator in this province, which is actually what I think people forget. PEO is the largest engineering regulator in Canada. Councillors have a very important job. And as presidents, I really have no vote. A lot of people don't, I think, realize that. So it's really the councillors who need to ask the tough questions and read their packages thoroughly to bring this diversity of thought and best practices from other organizations, especially if they have governance experience. PEO Council sets the direction of the organization and has a duty to monitor that direction. And councillors don't have our hands on the wheel of the ship. We're not steering it. That is the role of staff. But we have our nose in, sort of our hands and our fingers on the pulse. And so it's really our job is to ask questions.
Thank you. And Greg, your response, your role as a president-elect, then president, in fulfilling PEO's core mandates.
Well, there has been a move since these so-called governance reforms have been introduced to turning us into just a mere board of directors. And I don't think that's working very well. I think councillors need to have more pay more attention to their fiduciary duty and participate more in the debates and contribute diverse opinions to the discussions. Now, as Marilyn points out, the president doesn't really do that. If the president is chairing, the president sort of stays out of the thing. But I do say that as elected councillors, we are accountable to the people who put us in those chairs. And I see so many councillors that get elected and completely turn against the people who elected them. Now, I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need to do a little fiduciary duty. And one last thing I wanted to say is
I'm going to structure the questions to give you I'm totally going to let you build on that based on the next one. I have a plan.
Go for it, Mr. Chairman.
So the next question, in reminding of the order, it's going to go Marilyn, Greg, and Fred. I want to go to this question here, which is PEO Council is currently made up of 25 individuals who bring a variety of perspectives and engineers and as members of the public. Describe an experience you may have building consensus with a large group, disparaging perhaps groups, desperate groups. How would you apply this experience to PEO? So generally speaking, PEO is made up of 25 individuals. How are you going to manage that? And the first one goes to Marilyn.
I think it's really, really important that you build understanding. And I think we have plenary sessions for a reason, and it helps people talk even during over lunch hours. And I think in terms of building consensus, I have to be humble enough to change my own mind. It's like a mindset. We can't be so entrenched in our opinions that we can't be influenced by our intelligent, dedicated peers that are on council reading the same thing you are, because often things can be interpreted. So from a building consensus, I think it's really more, as they say, you're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's actively listening. And actually building those relationships of trust around the council table. And in terms of, sort of some of the examples I've had, I've changed my mind on council. When people put a compelling argument forward and it makes sense to me, and you listen, you can actually, you go, wow, okay, that makes sense. I can support that.
Thank you. And to Greg, how would you build council being made of 25 individuals? How would you manage that?
Well, I do have experience serving on large boards. One of the larger ones was when I was on the Ryerson Students Union. We had a board of 13 people, and believe me, we had some diverse opinions and people on that board. So I have experience doing that. The bottom line is you can't always get consensus. It sometimes evades you, and you have to learn how to live with it and pilot your way out of it. That being said, I think PEO's council is far too large. The city of Toronto also has, it has not 25, but 26 council members, but it administers a budget of $10 billion and a population, I think it's approaching 3 million. PEO becomes very unwieldy with such a large council. I would lobby the government to reduce the size.
Thank you. Fred, your response with respect to managing council of 25.
I'll try my best. I haven't been in the council though, like other candidates, but I would say that, yes, 25 is a big number, especially when we look at it the other way. You see, half of them are not elected. They're appointed. So reducing this number is very important because they're very slow. They don't make decisions fast enough, good enough, and they even don't make a good decision sometimes. I'm not saying that they're good. They're all well experienced. They're good people. They're devoting their time, but it's a big number. They have to be reduced. It has to be reduced. And second, you have to go with the majority. You have to see what members want, and then see what council majority would vote for it. Then we try to bring them together. Sometimes it's a big job. Sometimes it's a big hassle. Well, we have to work together. We have to be like not just sitting together. We have to be friends. We have to work together. We have to bring every idea we have on the table. We have to get any help we need to work together. Yes.
And I'm going to close out because there has been a lot of conversation about governance, and I want to allow that to flow one more time. And probably the last question in the governance kind of field. I was going to ask. There's a question about the governance roadmap. So between 2020 and 2022, PEO approved and implemented a governance roadmap, which committed council to certain changes in how it governed PEO. Could you please highlight how these new governance directions? Please highlight which of these new governance directions is most important to you as prospective president. And that first, it goes. The order goes Greg, Fred, and Marilyn now.
It does.
Well, regarding the governance roadmap, I really don't like.
Camera two.
Sorry. I really don't like being committed to this governance roadmap. For one thing, the members never saw this and never participated in any of it. It was the result of the Caton report. The Caton report was received by council. I was on council, but it was never endorsed or adopted. So this governance roadmap and the action plan which followed have committed us to a path which I don't think that we decided we wanted to go on. That being said, we're on it now, so we have to sort things out and figure out the best path.
What's that?
Thank you. And the first response goes to Fred.
Yes.
With respect to the governance roadmap, your comments on it.
Yeah, I reviewed that and I see there are three things that would grab my attention. One is review, simplify, and modernize PNG licensing process, which is very good, good step toward the right direction. Change management and enterprise-wide transformation communications, which I like it. It's again right direction. Incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices into all PO systems and operations. They are good, they are needed, but they're not enough. I believe it could be worked out for a better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marilyn, your response with respect to the governance roadmap?
Yeah, the governance direction that speaks to me is really the board renewal, composition, and selection. And I see this as an opportunity for engineers actually to build their own governance competencies by understanding the line between management and operations responsibilities and the board. So management versus operations. And they really need to understand what it means to set the strategic direction of an organization, but then monitor and hold management to account to achieve those goals. We need to understand how to read financial statements and really understand what our fiduciary duty is to PEO. And we need to understand what our personal liability is sitting on this board. I would love to see engineers move on from PEO Council armed with sharpened governance skills in their toolbox, right? And take these skills to other boards because engineers are pragmatic. We are critical thinkers, which is desperately needed on corporate boards. Engineers once were very sought after to be on corporate boards, but this has waned over the last 50 years. And I would like to see the demand return. And I feel that having engineers on corporate boards of organizations,
thank you, Marilyn.
It would be a benefit for the energy transition.
All right. So moving away from the governance and sort of what I describe as sort of issues. I wanted to go to the audience questions, and there's a bunch of them that sort of I can summarize that revolve around mandatory continuing education and in PEO, that is peak. So, and I'm going to just open-end the question to everybody and just ask you, what is your position on mandatory continuing professional development or the peak process system that PEO has provided? And in the order as Fred, Marilyn, Greg. So that's first to you, Fred.
Well, I would say whatever done in the past, I totally support it. PEAK is a good program, but it could be worked out better than what it is. A lot of people asking if it's possible to simplify it, to have a better understanding of it, and they're completely right. Hopefully, when we start it, it's mandatory. We all have to start it, or already started it. We have to see what ways, what experience we gain, and try to make it better. Not just leave it as it is for forever. If I want to be the leader in the future, I have to look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. To Marilyn, your position on mandatory continuing professional development and peak?
I've always thought that, sort of how as a regulator can PEO confidently show the evidence to the AG's office, who's our boss, or the people of Ontario, that, PEO is regulating practitioners. If they do not collect data with enough details to illustrate what areas where their license holders practice and how these folks are keeping themselves competent to practice over their career. I'm a big supporter of peak. I was on the task force. I also participated every year. I got paid to do my peak because if you teach and you have to do research, you're learning. So I've always said it's a no-brainer. And this mandatory CPD issue is an issue of public trust. And if my fitness instructor is required to complete mandatory CPD by their regulator, and I don't think they're even regulated, as well as dentists and all the other engineers in Canada, why not engineers in Ontario? And I think people don't realize, okay, there's another point I'll bring later.
And Craig, to you, your position on mandatory continuing professional development or peak and peak.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I could spend like 20 minutes on this topic. I'm categorically opposed to the PEAK program, which has been launched. Nobody is opposed to preserving and enhancing capability. I just don't think this program will do it. And it troubles me. What really troubles me about this is not the PEAK program. It's the sleazy way this came in through the back door. We were promised that the members would have participation in its development and that they would vote on it. And then council reversed its decision. Council reneged on that promise. And what they did was they slipped it in through the back door through the action plan. The action plan was developed mostly by staff, not by volunteers. And then it was made compulsory. So the question I see is, what was made compulsory? Council never saw the final product and approved it.
Thank you. So, try to keep the questions as open as I can. And this next question goes to Marilyn. What weaknesses, if any, should PEO seek to improve in its role as a regulator or in its governance model?
Guess I have to get off mute. In terms of a weakness, I actually think one of the biggest things is governance, because everything comes from the top. Many professional self-regulators are improving their governance. Better governance is proven to be directly connected to better organizational performance. And I would love it. It's my dream one day. We have a new CEO and registrar. And if we have better governance and we can hold our CEO to account and we understand sort of the culture that we want to see, we can oversee, an organization that perhaps, PEO could be a top 100 employer in Canada. Now, wouldn't that be fantastic? But I think we often hear from candidates, what does PEO do for me? It's disrespecting the members, but I very rarely hear people say, what does PEO like to work for? And is an organization I'd like to work for.
And Greg, your response to BC's PEO's weaknesses as a regulator or governance?
Well, I'll start by saying our strengths. We are big, and unlike regulators of other professions or other provincial regulators, we have the muscle to steer the entire engineering profession. Our primary weakness, I have to disagree with my friend Marilyn, it's not governance. We are spending so much time and energy on governance that we are neglecting the core issues of licensing, enforcement, and discipline, in my opinion. And the big issue here, the elephant in the room, is our ineffective liaison with business and with government. We got a black eye in the repeal of the industrial exception when industry stepped in because we had failed to include them in our debates, our discussions. It went to third reading, it was ready for royal assent, and then they pulled the plug on it. We screwed up on that. So the big issue is liaison with government and in industry.
Thank you. And Fred.
Well, I would say the biggest weakness is communication. Look at how things work here. Like, for example, we don't have any public voting process. Nobody knows, no member, everybody knows what's going on in the council, what they're looking for. Our biggest power, our biggest strength comes from the members, but we keep them in dark. They don't have the communication. We don't have the perfect communication, proper communication with them. If they are involved, if they know what's going on, then we're getting the power and resources, and we can go to government, we can go everywhere to industry, we can apply the rules and regulations we want. And we can modernize. We need to modernize PEO, and not just working the same way hundreds of years ago. You know what I'm saying? When we need new thoughts, new ideas, which are not coming. The current councillor, they're doing a great job, but most of their efforts are useless. because of that. Okay.
So I've told you before off camera, and now tell you now, I take my cues for what next questions are based on when I see some of the answers that often do that. So with that in mind, I heard a lot about stakeholders. Next question goes to Greg, then Fred, then Marilyn. A strategic goal in the PEO's 2023-2025 strategic plan is to ensure all stakeholders see relevance and value in PEO. And reflecting on this goal, whom would you identify as some of PEO's key stakeholder groups or organizations, and what do you think is meaningful and appropriate engagement with specific stakeholder groups? What would that look like? To you, Greg.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to see that this strategic plan, unlike its predecessor, at least mentioned the membership, our 88,000 PNGs, as stakeholders. I would submit that they are our prime stakeholder. They have invested their lives, their careers, everything into this profession. And we have to, I understand what my friend Marilyn has said, that we are not advocating for our members, but what we are doing is we're advocating for the profession. We're trying to make the profession better. And so if we ignore our prime stakeholder, which is our membership, then we can't address the other stakeholders, including the public we serve.
Thank you. And Fred, to you, your response with respect to stakeholders.
Can you repeat the whole question again?
No problem. My pleasure. Okay. So a strategic goal in PEO's 2023-2025 strategic plan is to ensure all stakeholders see relevance and value in PEO. And reflecting on this goal, who would you identify as some of PEO's key stakeholder groups or organizations? And what do you think meaningful and appropriate engagement with specific stakeholder groups might look like?
Sure. The very first one is public. In public eyes, professional engineers are pioneers of safety and reliance. If this image is ruined, then we'll all lose our privilege to serve public. The second one is government. Politicians intend to give assurance to people that they're in good hands in terms of services, production, technology. PEO must keep this image alive and alive to receive support from them. Third one is industry leaders. By making sure all license holders are responsible for their actions, PEO creates a good relationship with industrial leaders who hire professional engineers to do their job. And advocacy groups, people who feel responsible to help our profession, I consider them valuable assets. Listening to them would bring good insight, which in turn would help to minimize mistakes, which we're not doing right now.
Thank you. And Marilyn, your response with respect to stakeholders.
Yeah, I see the public as PEO's key stakeholder. Those who use the products of engineering, either use them physically or even use them in their decision making. The PEO staff is also a key stakeholder. We have over 120 employees, in addition to various levels of government and business sectors in Ontario. I would say that engineers, obviously, applicants, students are also large stakeholder groups. The Attorney General's office, I see, is more of a partner because they grant PEO its privilege of self-regulation, but there's other ministries that we can partner with, like the Ministry of Labor. There is also other stakeholders could be other professional regulators, for example, the Association of Professional Geoscience of Ontario, as there are many overlapping scopes of practice between engineering, geoscience. A proper stakeholder mapping, it's actually a process, needs to be done. And to me, that's the job of staff to bring to council for their approval.
So next question, I'm going to go online. Just some of the submitted questions for the online. And the first one goes to Fred, and I'm reading this one verbatim. PEO has a reputation that it is an old boys club. Do you agree or disagree? And what do you think PEO needs to do to reassure the public and its members that it is a welcoming and inclusive organization?
Well, that's a very broad question. You have to be very specific. I don't understand what you mean by that, the old boys club.
Well, let me go to the end of the question then. What do you think PEO needs to do to reassure the public and its members that it is a welcoming and inclusive organization?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it has to bring all professional engineers or people have the potential to be professional engineers under its own umbrella. And then you can govern them, you can make sure, give assurance to people that it works properly and it works for the public. And second, it has to create a very good communication with the, as I said, with the politicians, with the public, with the industrial leaders, with the advocacy groups, and try not to leave anybody behind. And when people feel this, PEO gives them this confidence that they're all included, they're all heard. I talked to some people, some counselors or some professional members up north, up in east or west. They have never heard about what PEO is doing, or nobody even tried to reach them, talk to them. You know what I'm saying? So even its own members feel isolated.
Thank you.
What do you expect? No.
Marilyn.
Hi. I actually think that might have been true in the past, but I do not think that's true. PEO has some strengths, and this transformational change plan that we've gone through and the governance has actually pushed the working of council to a higher level. I'm just thrilled that we approved the anti-racism and equity policy last year by council, and that's paved the way to remove barriers for other equity, seeking groups in both PEO operations, in the regulatory mandate through applicant licensing, processes, and also in our governance and how we maybe select counselors and things. And it also includes Indigenous reconciliation. It's all part and parcel of just removing barriers for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is proven to be better for and to help organizations function more effectively.
Thank you. And to Greg?
Well, a couple of months ago, I made a keynote speech to the Association of Filipino Engineers, Canadian Filipino Engineers. And, I can't summarize everything I said in that speech. You can go to my website. I've posted the speech on my website, gregwolchuk.ca. One of the things I noted during that talk was that engineers from, let me get the list here, India, Iran, China, Egypt, Pakistan, UK, Nigeria, Brazil, Bangladesh, and Lebanon comprised 25.5% of our applicants in 2020, and only 42.2% were Canadian educated engineers. So PEO is changing. And the other thing that is forcing our hand is the FAR-PACTA issue, where we've committed to removing barriers to licensure.
Thank you. So next question, it starts with Marilyn. I'm going back to online, and this one's I'm not paraphrasing. I'll go verbatim. It relates to self-regulation. So, what would you do as president if the Attorney General stepped in similar to Quebec and BC and notified PEO that the government was removing our self-regulation status? That's Marilyn, then Greg and Fred.
I could talk a lot about this one, but I think we can't really compare ourselves to Quebec because Quebec was put under trusteeship over poor financial management. And Quebec, BC Engineers was rescinded and replaced with the Professional Reliance Act, which encompassed other professions. But, if I was to, I see risks for PEO. Our profession in Ontario of PEO starts to slide backwards from the progress that's been made in both the governance and transformational change plan that has occurred over the last 5 years. For example, I still hear people arguing about mandatory CPD for professional engineers. which is called for in 2 public inquiries, the coroner's inquest into the death of Scott Johnson and the Elliott Lake inquiry where Doris Perizzo and Lucy Alwyn both died. You know, I would like people to maybe go and speak to their families and think about what, you know, whether CPD should be mandatory or
Thank
not.
And to Greg.
Oh, I have to jump in on that one. Look, the CPD program that is being proposed would not have made a difference in Elliott Lake. It got inserted into the report only because one of our attendees from PEO mentioned it in a roundtable discussion. It was not a matter of competence. PEO has competent engineers. Ours are the best in the world. So, you know, I don't buy that argument at all. You know, I don't see any threat from the provincial government. The provincial government tried to intervene in our affairs on the issue of the Bragg, and we went to court, and the court decided that PEO had the right to run its affairs relating to engineering. So I'm not worried about that. And as for BC, they had a government which was taking heat over the collapse of the tailings pond, so it was a special issue. And as Marilyn noted, in Quebec, there was this corruption thing.
Thank you.
That doesn't apply to Ontario.
And to Fred.
Yeah, would you repeat the question again?
My pleasure. What would you do as president if the Attorney General stepped in similar to Quebec and BC and notified PEO that the government was removing our self-regulation status?
Well, I try to resist. First of all, I try to communicate with the government officials, everybody who's involved, and see what's the problem. We have to keep our self-regulatory privilege. We can't just let them take it. If there is any problem, we have to resolve it. If there is any task they ask, we have to do it. At the same time, we will keep our privilege to add something more to it. If it's just a government agency, nothing happened. None of these wonderful activities, projects that we can work on, that we have opportunity for, we're going to lose all of them. And this is not good. So I will resist. I will fight legally. I will try to keep our privilege.
Thank you. So the next question starts with Greg. And staying in the world of the provincial world, there's a question here about and we're going to talk for PACTA, which I'll outline for a second. From a public protection standpoint, what, if any, value do you see in PEO's efforts to streamline the licensure of engineering graduates, Canadian or internationally trained? And what, if any, opportunities are created by recent government changes, example, amendments to the Fair Access to Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act, or for PACTA?
Well, for PACTA, to start out here, for PACTA had a clause in it that allowed professions, if they could demonstrate that there was a danger to the public interest by complying with FARPACTA, we could apply for an extension or we could apply for an exemption. We chose not to do that. So FARPACTA is part of PEO's responsibility right now. I am not in favor of lowering any standards in admissions or in performance of licensed engineers. I personally, to me, equity means equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. I'm opposed to artificial constructs which give one group recognition or advantage over any other group. I want true equity in this profession, and I think that's what we have to focus on.
Thank you. And Fred?
Well, I would say not just FARPACTA, any other decision made in the past, I fully support. In fact, I would say I'm not going to be the president of the past. I'm going to be the president of the future. Anything new comes, I work on it, and I communicate with people, with the members. But in terms of just focusing on PACTA, I think it's a good step. It's a good step to our professionalism. I believe PEO should have started it a long time ago, to minimize, to clean up this process, to make it better, and efficient for everybody. Well, in the future, we'll see what other new rules and regulations will come. We'll work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marilyn.
There are huge opportunities I see in streamlining licensure and creating a more fair and transparent licensing process. It can only benefit. And our role as counselors is to protect PEO as part of our fiduciary duty to the organization. And compliance with the Fair Access to the Regulated Professions and Compulsory Trades Act allows PEO to mitigate risk, which is our fiduciary duty. And it is similar to being compliant with other laws, such as the Occupational Health and Safety Act, or the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, or the Ontario Human Rights legislation. It's just good governance to be compliant with other laws. And this is an act. ProPACTA is an act. And good governance, applying good governance protects the organization that council has oversight of. And if we don't, we're negligent, which makes us personally liable.
Thank you. So we have time for probably two more, depending how long it takes. So this one here recently it's rather open-ended. It's it's with respect to defining success. So how will you define success during your term on council? And that goes to Fred, then Marilyn, and Greg. How would you define success during your term of council?
Well, if I'm the first, is it? Yeah. Okay. It's cooperation. First of all, we have to work and communicate with all councillors, government, everybody. That's one important thing. Everybody knows everything, not just one person, one group. We have to bring advocacy groups in. We have to talk to them, see what recommendations they have. We have to create a public communication, probably social group, and ask members what they feel is good. And we have to keep communicating with the government, politicians, and see what they want. This is the most important part. Good communication, relationship between everybody. And what else I can say to have success? Try to improve everything. We don't look at it just as is and leave it. I haven't been a counselor in the past. I would say that I don't think like a counselor. I just want to think like a leader. Thank you.
And to Marilyn, how would you define success by the end of your term?
I would consider my year or 3 years, if we're elected, a success if council continues to progress with PEO's transformational change journey. This journey will focus or steer PEO to become a professional, modern regulator that delivers on its statutory mandate and is supported by a governance culture that consistently makes decisions that serve and protect the public interest. And I keep saying we have this duty of care over PEO as an employer, and you often don't hear counselors speak about that. But I would love to see, if you look at literature in terms of business, what high-performing organization changes the chair of their board every year? And that is part of the problem as well. But we can digress and talk about that maybe at a little later. It's hard to get traction when you're changing your leaders so often.
Thank you. And Greg, how would you define success during your term on council?
Well, my friend just made a reference to the transformational change. Look, PEO was doing a great job before this so-called transformational change. Even Harry Caton in his report said so. This transformation, go to my website and read about Hardin's Law. You can never do merely one thing. There are always other unintended consequences. Regarding success, it's not up to me to decide whether I've been successful. That's up to the people who put me in the chair, the 88,000 members. But I would like to see more than 12% of our members voting in the elections. I would like to see a closer relationship with government, and I would like to see a closer relationship with industry. If we do those things, then we have been successful. Then PEO will be relevant again. And that's what I would shoot for if I were president.
Thank you. And this is going to be the last question. Starting with Marilyn, then Greg, then Fred. What's the one thing you want voters to know about you?
The one thing that I'd like voters to know about me. Well, I'm altruistic. I do things for the collective and not necessarily for my own personal gain. We all know the pay is really high being on council, right, guys? Like nothing. It's a lot of time. So I would like people to know that I often feel leadership. When people say they're a leader, I question it because I don't think people deem themselves a leader. I think other people have to see you as a leader. So it's more important to me what other people say about me. And I do have a website, www.marilynspink.ca, because I'm Canadian. And I have quite a few testimonials where people have said what they think about me in my leadership capacity. And I've often been put in leadership and had I've won some awards where my peers have recognized me as well. And I think that's more important what other people say about you.
And to Greg, so the one thing you want voters to know about you?
I think people need to know that I'm an ordinary guy with extraordinary ideas. And I focus on basics very well, and I have little use for unnecessary bureaucracy and for manufactured complexity. I have an extremely broad background. I've studied psychology, effective communications. I have all kinds of board experience, and I have 25 years of involvement in PEO. So that's more than one thing. But the main thing is, in general, I'm an ordinary guy with a lot of background, and I think I could do the job of being PEO's president exceedingly well. I hope I could.
Thank you. And the last response to you, Fred, what is the one thing you want voters to know about you?
Well, I would say that I wouldn't be just another councillor sitting in the council with one vote. I would ask for a strong president act if it's possible. A president should have a vision, should take risky decisions, should be ready for challenges, for problems, critical situations. Well, in most cases, 99%, maybe nothing happened. But 1%, if something happened, a strong leadership would work. Not just sitting there and waiting and see what happens. That's what I bring, because I'm in business. I'm doing business. I'm in industry for many years, and taking chances, working with people, and gaining a lot of experience to make things happen. This is my strength.
Thank you. This concludes the question portion of the meeting. Now, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks. In the same order that we did the opening remarks, Greg Wojcik, your closing remarks.
Better unmute first. Thanks for tuning in, folks, tonight. I'd like to wrap up tonight's program by summarizing certain principles that I stand for. You can find out much, much more at gregwolchuk.ca. There's a lot of information there. I'm running because I think PEO is heading in a perilous direction, which threatens the future of the profession. I think our membership's increasing indifference and apathy show that they agree with me, and it's time to get back on track. The public interest is best served by a profession we are all proud to belong to, one which we all work on to make better, not by one that we simply pay fees to and ignore. PEO is a member-directed, self-regulating profession. That is what the government intended when it created us 100 years ago. We do not need to be told what is good for us, not by our council, not by employers, and certainly not by hired consultants. The first step in reforming this profession is to elect councillors committed to changing this faulty mindset. We also have to work to reverse the big lie that PEO is not a democracy and that serving the needs of the profession cannot coexist with serving the public. You and I, we are this profession. We are the prime stakeholder. We have invested our lives and our future in our profession. I am committed to a relevant, modern, essential, diverse PEO and to defending the principles of self-regulation. I ask for your support to do so.
Thank you. Fred Shigechi, your
Yeah.
closing remarks.
Well, I would say if I'm there, if I start this job, I try to improve everything, but not just looking at what is good. It's look at what is the weakness, what is bad. You have to bring them all on the table. You have to start fixing them, fixing the problem, see what it is. You have to listen to everybody, to advocacy groups, to other professions, to members, to politicians, to everybody, to see what we can do to make it better. It's not about me. It's not about even one organization that can do the job. It's about all of us. If I'm there, I try to bring everybody on the table. If I want to work with everybody to see how we can make things better and avoid the problems, avoid the weaknesses, avoid anything that would oppose us in our way by improving ourselves first and then improving the PO. Hopefully, if members trust me, I'll be there. I will work with everybody. I devote my time. I owe my time to PO, to our profession. Whatever I got was from that, so I have to give something in return. I have to help. The only thing I gain is self-satisfaction that I do something good for everybody. No, so hopefully we can work together and make sure everything will be done properly. Again, I wanna, as I explained at the beginning, I wanna say that I believe a leader must have a vision to make risky decisions in critical situations. If leader cannot do this, then what is the leader for? All right. And I'm all about accountability, devotion, integrity, professionalism, transparency, and honesty. I just repeating this when I started to emphasize what I'm going to do. It's not
Thank
just something we say, you know.
Marilyn Spink, your closing remark.
Okay, I just want to thank you, Art, for moderating and the staff and all their efforts in the Encore Productions, is it, that organize and hold these all candidate meetings. And to thank Greg and Fred for showing up and putting their names forward. My name is Marilyn Spink, and I am a practicing engineer, and I've been licensed with PEO since 1995, and it always meant a lot to me. I think we're all here because we do care about the profession. I've been involved with PEO for over 7 years. I have deep council experience. I've been selected by my peers as both elected and appointed vice president. I'm fiscally responsible. I've been a member of the Audit and Finance Committee and brought in balanced budgets. I've been chair of PEO's Public Information Campaign Task Force. I'm other people call me a leader. I don't call myself one. I'm committed to open and transparent governance. I was a member of the Complaints Committee, which is PEO's regulatory mandate. I support and engage PEO chapters as well, and I think they need to be more engaged. And we're here to protect the public interest. And I want to continue modernization of PEO to ensure a future-ready, inclusive, and responsive engineering regulator, which will result in a strong engineering and relevant engineering profession. And I just wanted to say that, Councillor Wojcik does talk about that PEO is fine and PEO does a great job, and it has for many, many years. Well, in that regulatory performance report, we got a mark of 43%. And if that's excellence, I don't know what you think failure is. And that report was shared with the Attorney General, and he's our boss, and he expects, she at the time too, and they expect us to act and rectify some of the issues that were identified. And we're well on our way with our governance renewal and our transformational change plan.
Thank you.
And so please elect Marilyn for PEO President-elect. I ask for your
Thank you. Now, this concludes tonight's discussion. I would like to thank the candidates for their participation. Also those watching online for their interest in the governance of the engineering profession. I hope you found the meeting to be informative and worthwhile. As a reminder, a recording of all meetings will be on PEO's website for the duration of the election. Thank you again to everyone for participating in our discussion. And remember, your profession matters, so does your vote. Voting is quick and easy. You can vote on the internet or by phone. Voting opens on January 13th and closes at 4 p.m. on February 17th. All the information you need is at our website at www.peo.on.ca. Good night.